Hello guys, I hope and pray that you're fine wherever you are. I welcome you again to this platform, and I kindly request that before you watch this video, kindly subscribe to this platform, and after doing that I would say thank you. Now there is this trend in Africa and in Kenya to be specific, where leaders do what they don't promise and promise what they don't do. If you are a good follower of this platform, you will always know and be aware that I have insisted to my viewers not to trust politicians. I want to repeat on this platform again and on this discussion today that there is a critical difference between a politician and a leader, and I have always emphasized that in Africa we have politicians and we lack leaders. Leaders are the individuals who will do what they say, and politicians are individuals who will never do what they say. In fact, they do the exact opposite of what they say. Today I want to be specific to Kenya, and I want to give just a practical example of what happens when we elect politicians into office, when we vote for politicians and not leaders. You know, in Kenya there has always been this tendency of these politicians promising what they don't do, and they tend to give these promises during campaign periods, and after campaigns and after being elected into political office they tend to do the opposite. Now, for those who understand the Kenyan politics, you will understand that Kenya is currently in a very strong and let me say, Kenya is currently in a quagmire. The economic situation in Kenya is extremely poor. The political situation in Kenya is also extremely poor, and the majority of Kenyans are suffering from the harsh economic conditions. When you look at the situation in Kenya, you will realize that the problems which are currently facing Kenyans are manufactured. It is Kenyans who embroiled themselves into these issues, these challenges, because they trusted these politicians so much, and they decided to elect them, to vote for them and elect them, give them opportunities to serve. Now, after doing that, now it is currently the time for Kenyans to suffer. They suffer because of the wrong choices that they made during elections. I want to give a very brief overview of what the current administration in Kenya promised versus the current dynamics, the current situation in the country. From what I will present, you will realize that politicians always they promise heaven, and after promising heaven they deliver hell, and that is what Kenya is currently facing. What the Kenya Kwanza administration promised Kenyans is completely different from what is happening in Kenya today. I will give just a brief overview of the Kenya Kwanza administration, the current administration, what they promised Kenyans, and I will leave you to be the judge. Be the judge and assess if what these people promised Kenyans are what they are doing. Now, when you look at the manifesto of these individuals, I call them politicians because they are not leaders, because I did say that when we talk about leaders, these are people who are concerned with the interests of citizens, and politicians are concerned with their issues, their interests. Now, the current administration focused their manifesto on various issues. The issues that they touched on included agricultural transformation, housing, healthcare, digital superhighway, infrastructure, manufacturing, ICT, tourism, aviation, sports, education, women agenda, social protection, and governance. Now, I will just give a brief overview how this administration committed to Kenyans, what they committed that they will do to Kenyans. It is a very long manifesto, and I will not go into every detail, but I will focus on the commitments that these individuals gave to Kenyans. Now, when you look at the first section of their manifesto, you will find agricultural transformation and inclusive growth. These individuals promised heaven to Kenyans, and the same individuals are now delivering hell to Kenyans. One of their commitments was to provide adequate affordable working capital to all farmers through corporate societies. Provide adequate affordable working capital to all farmers through corporate societies. The second commitment in agricultural transformation was deploy modern agricultural risk management instruments that ensure farming is profitable and income is predictable, such as was provided for scheduled crops by the Guaranteed Minimum Returns scheme. They also committed to transform 2 million poor farmers from food deficit to surplus producers through input finance and intensive agricultural extension support, with a target to generate minimum productivity target of 50,000 revenue per acre. At this point, I think you can be the judge. This individual promised to transform 2 million poor farmers from food deficit to surplus producers. I don't know whether they have achieved that, but as a Kenyan and as an individual who is informed of current affairs, what is going on in the country, I want to say that the situation is more worse. The individuals also promised to raise productivity of key value food chains. Maize 8 to 15 bags per acre, dairy 2.5 kg to 7.5 kg per cow per day, beef carcass weight from 110 to 150 kg. They also promised to reduce dependence on basic food imports by 30%, domestic oil crops production from 5% to 25%, rice from 18% to 40%. They also promised to revamp underperforming collapsed export products, expand emerging ones, coffee, cashew nuts, pyrethrum, avocado, macadamia. They also promised to move up tea value chain. Now, I don't know. I just want you to be the judge. As this government delivered on these commitments, have they delivered on these promises? If we talk about transforming 2 million poor farmers from food deficit to surplus producers, if we talk about raising productivity of key value chains, if we talk about reducing dependence on basic food imports, we talk about revamping underperforming collapsed export products and moving tea value chain, blending and branding. I don't know whether they have delivered on these commitments, but in my view, this government has made the situation more worse. Sorry. When you look at the same agricultural transformation, they also talked about revamping the micro, small and medium enterprise economy, and their commitments included regressive taxation, reviewing. They promised that they will review and rationalize all business licenses, cap total licenses at 1.5% of turnover, and enact administrative burden law. They also promised to commit 50 billion a year to provide SMEs with 100% access to affordable finance through SACCOs and venture capital. They also promised that they will establish SME business development center in every ward and an industrial park and business incubation center in every TVET institution. I want to say that the government is not even closer to delivering on these promises that I have just mentioned. I know viewers will justify whether the government has delivered on what I have just mentioned. When we go to housing and settlement, the Kenya Kwanza administration promised and they committed. You know, when you talk about commitment, that is like they say promises are dead, and when you commit, that means that it is as if you give a formal verdict. You formally agree that I will do, and if I don't do, hold me accountable. On housing and settlement, the current administration promised that they will increase supply of new housing to 250,000 per year, and percentage of affordable housing supply from 2% to 50%. They also promised that they will grow the number of mortgages from 30,000 to 1 million by enabling low-cost mortgages of Kenya shillings 10,000 and below possible. They also promised that they will strengthen Juakali industry capacity to produce high-quality construction productions. They also promised to give developers incentives to build more affordable housing. In my view, nothing has been done on this sector, and in fact, the situation is even worse. When I assess this from last year. Let us go to the commitment of this government on healthcare. You know, healthcare is a critical component of a community, a society, a government, a nation state, a country. Healthcare determines almost everything, and if people are healthy, then that means that they can do everything. They can work, earn income, and live good lives. The Kenya Kwanza administration promised on healthcare that there will be fully publicly financed primary healthcare, preventive, promotive, outpatient, and basic diagnostic services that gives patients choice between public, faith-based, and private providers based on a regulated tariff. They also promised that there will be a universal seamless health insurance system comprising a mandatory national insurance NHIF and private insurance as complementary covers, with NHIF as the primary and private as secondary cover. These individuals also promised that they will provide national fund for chronic and catastrophic illness and injury costs not covered by insurance to be funded by a combination of insurance levy and government. Now, when I talk about this insurance issue, I am one of the holders of this thing known as NHIF, and according to the proposals that this current government gave, initially we were paying, before this administration, we were paying 500 shillings per month. According to the proposals that this government gave, they suggested that the amount be increased to 1,000 for the unemployed. Those who are unemployed should pay 1,000 Kenya shillings monthly, and for those who are employed, they were to be deducted according to the rates suggested by the government. Now, remember, this government said that there will be fully publicly financed primary health care. The government also said there will be universal seamless health insurance system, and the same government has now increased taxes for NHIF and taxes for private cover. Now you will be the judge and tell me if this government is doing what they promised. let us go to digital supply. Some call it digital superhighway and creative economy. I want to look at the commitments of this government on this issue. On digital superhighway and creative economy, the Kenya Kwanza administration promised and committed that there will be universal broadband availability throughout the country within 5 years. We shall increase and fast-track broadband connectivity across the country by the construction of 100,000 kilometers of national fiber optic connectivity network. They also committed to enhance government service delivery through digitalization and automation of all government critical processes and make available 80% of government services online. The government also promised to establish Africa Regional Hub and promote development of software for export. Lastly, the government promised the implementation of the digital master plan that will adhere to environmental agreements in which Kenya is a signatory. They also promised to reduce the cost of calls and data to allow wananchi and especially the youth to use online platforms for entertainment, information and business. Wananchi, when we talk about wananchi in Kenya, that is the same as saying citizens. Now, in this context, the most popular phrase that this government used is that there will be free internet access. And the current president was quoted saying that people will now be making calls freely because they will have internet access, they will not be requiring data to make calls and the rest. I don't know whether that is true, but in my view, that is completely untrue, completely false, because sorry, currently I still use data and the internet access is still not free. I still pay for internet access. That is the same government that promised that there will be free internet access and there will be no data being used for wananchi citizens. Politicians. Let us look at infrastructure. What these people committed to do under infrastructure. The Kenya Kwanza administration promised that they will complete all roads under construction and they will prioritize upgrading and maintenance of rural access roads as well as the improvement of roads in infrastructure in urban informal settlement and critical national and regional trunk roads that have the highest immediate economic impact. I don't know whether this is true because I can't say that the roads which they talked about have been completed, and I don't want to say that they have upgraded and maintained the rural access roads. I want viewers on this platform to suggest and ascertain whether this government has delivered on these commitments, because I know some will view this platform and they come from these rural areas and they are capable of justifying whether this government has committed on these issues, has delivered on such issues. When we talk about fuel, they also had some commitments on petroleum, and this is very critical. In fact, when we talk about Kenya, when we mention the word petroleum, this is very critical because currently in my country we are faced with the problem of hiking prices of petrol. Petrol products have increased in prices, and let us listen to what this government said. Let us listen to their commitments. The Kenya Kwanza administration committed that they will set up a legal framework to ring-fence the fuel stabilization fund. They also promised and committed that they will leverage the financial support that will be provided to the border sector through the Hustler Fund to develop the nascent electric EV motorcycle assembly industry. They also committed to create incentives for adoption of electric mass transit systems in all cities and towns. When we talk about petroleum, I think the Energy CS proposed that the price of fuel will increase up to 300 shillings. That will be the historical high. I don't know whether what is happening now is tangent with what these people promised. You will tell me. Let us move to manufacturing. What did they say about manufacturing? This government promised that they will deploy a credible macroeconomic framework and growth strategy to strengthen external creditworthiness. To strengthen external creditworthiness, enabling government to borrow externally cheaply and crowding out private sector from the domestic credit market. They also promised to leverage on Kenya's well-developed SACCO system, develop a Tier 3 financial system to provide affordable credit to the underserved, with specific focus to smallholder farmers and SMEs, but also venture finance affordable housing. They also promised to develop and deploy a robust financial services consumer protection policy and legal frameworks that will provide Kenyans from predatory lenders. Let us move to ICT. The Kenya Kwanza administration committed 5% of the Hustler Fund, that is around 2.5 billion per year, to Kenyan ICT startups from the shillings 50 billion Hustler Fund. They also committed to include ICT labs and incubators in each of the industrial parks that will be established in the TVETs, constitute a stakeholder-led task force to review the recently enacted ICT law. They also committed to identify and remove the bottlenecks that stalled Kenya's BPO sector. They also promised and committed to constitute a stakeholder-led task force to review the recently enacted ICT law. Now, one of the eye-catching commitments of this government concerns the 5% of the Hustler Fund, which was around 2.5 billion per year, which was committed to ICT startups. I don't know whether this has happened, but I know my viewers will tell me if the government has successfully delivered on that. Let us move to the other section, which involves tourism. And when we talk about tourism, you know, Kenya is one of the major tourist destinations in Africa, if not in the world. And tourism accounts for a large part of the economy. And if tourism is improved, then that means that Kenya's economy is also improved. What did the Kenya Kwanza government commit to citizens during campaigns? This government said that they will nurture a tourism ecosystem that supports independent travel, particular for young people, including quality, secure, budget hotels and bed and breakfast to all parts of the country and safe road travel. They also promised and committed to diversify Kenya's tourism by promoting niche market products, notably adventure tourism, sports, cultural tourism. The government also promised to diversify source markets and especially African markets. On aviation, what did they say that they will do on this aviation thing? The government, the current government, promised Kenyans that they will commit to develop a turnaround strategy for Kenya Airways within 6 months. It is past 1 year now. And they also said that a critical plank of this strategy will be financing plan in a finance that does not depend on operational support from the exchequer beyond December 2013. I don't know whether that has happened, but you will tell me. Let us move to sports. What did they say about sports? You know, Kenya is one of the African countries that excels in sports. And as I did say about tourism, sports is also a critical part of Kenya's economic development. And the Kenya Kwanza administration knew this, and they made some commitments to Kenyans. What did they say? They said that within 100 days, they shall establish a high level, 100 days, that is around 3 months, they shall establish a high level expert task force to identify sustainable sources of sports funding. They also committed to establish and resource adequately a dedicated function within the tourism promotion function to attract international sporting events. They also committed to leverage on Kenya's international athletics brand to develop as a domestic sports apparel manufacturing cluster. They also promised to expand National Youth Talent Academy to include all sports and simultaneously devolve it to county level to introduce county sports talent academy with capacity to systematically identify promising sporting talent and provide necessary support. They also promised and committed to promote county leagues and inter-county sports championships. They promised to establish a sporting heroes benevolent fund. I don't know whether these commitments have been achieved. Sorry. But I kindly request that those who will participate in this discussion to answer on the comment section and inform the platform whether the current administration has delivered on any of these commitments. Let us move to agroforestry. The government committed that they will establish 5 million acres agroforestry woodlots in drylands. 5 million acres agroforestry woodlots in drylands. I think this is not even feasible. Not even, I don't know whether they have even planted even let me say even 100, even 1 million. Let me even talk about 500,000 of these agroforestry woodlots in drylands. I don't know, but you will tell me. The government also committed to modernize and commercialize the charcoal value chain, specifically the adoption of modern kilns, decriminalize the charcoal trade, support scaling up of clean cooking technologies, and operate briquetting enterprises where agricultural waste is available in commercially viable quantities. I don't know whether that is possible. I don't know. Let us move to another critical part of the government's commitment, which is very important not only to Kenya but Africa and the world: education. What did they say about education, and what were their commitments in improving the state of education in Kenya? We all know that, for those who understand the politics of Kenya, you will understand that in Kenya, going to school in Kenya is very expensive, and currently joining a university and completing a university degree in Kenya is quite expensive. As a graduate, during my time as a government sponsored student, we used to pay around, let me say, 14,000 per semester. Currently 14,000, when I talk about 14,000, that can be equated to around let me say 14, around 30,000. Around 30,000 per semester, per year. 30,000 per year. Currently, 1 year in university with the same course that I did amounts to around 150,000 in Kenya. That is how expensive it is. And let us look at what these people said about education. What did they say? How did they promise Kenyans that they will improve the state of education? Sorry. The government said that they will pay for in-service teacher training initiated by government. They also said that they will bridge current teacher shortage gap of 116,000 within 2 financial years. They also promised, that is like employing 116,000 teachers within 2 years. I don't know, we are in the first year, I don't know. And in the first year they should have employed around half. That is around around 50,000, around 55,000. I don't know whether they have done that. I am a teacher, but I'm currently not employed, so I don't know whether they have employed those 116,000 teachers or 50,000 teachers. They also promised that they will put in place a special service tariff for all learning institutions for basic utilities to facilitate. They also promised to review the current exam-based system of academic progression, which has excluded millions of learners based on basic education level exit exams. They also promised to improve capacity of day secondary schools to guarantee access to quality education and reduce the cost of education. The government also promised to establish National Scale and Funding Council that amalgamates HELB, TVET and University Funding Board and increase funding to bridge the current 45% gap. I don't know whether the state of education has improved in Kenya, and I don't know whether the current administration has delivered on its promises that it made to the commitments that it made to the citizens during campaigns. I want you to tell me if they have done. I don't want to be the judge in this. I know there are majority Kenyans are watching this, so I want those Kenyans to tell us whether this has been achieved. Another area of commitment for this government was women agenda, and this government promised that they will provide financial and capacity building support for women through the Hustler Fund for women-led cooperative societies, chamas, merry-go-rounds, and table banking initiatives, and protect them from predatory interest rates charged by unscrupulous money lenders. They also promised that they will support the realization of the 2/3 gender rule in elective and appointive positions in the public sector within 12 months, that is 1 year, following election, including 50% cabinet positions to women. I know there will be ladies who will be watching this discussion. I want you to tell me whether the government has achieved the 2/3 gender rule in elective and appointive positions in the public sector, and whether they included 50% of women in cabinet positions. The government also committed to increase the number of and personnel at gender desks at police stations, as well as increase funding for the Anti-Female Genital Mutilation Board, fully implement the anti-FGM law. They also promised to establish a social welfare fund for Kenya women working abroad to provide a safety net for distressed diaspora citizens. I don't know whether that has been done, but you will tell me. The government also committed to ensure deployment of adequate numbers of skilled community health workers on a regular stipend paid through a cost-sharing framework. They also committed to ensure availability of clean, safe, environmentally friendly and affordable cooking fuels. They also promised to provide free sanitary towels in all schools and public washrooms, easily accessible to economically disadvantaged women. This one I must talk about. Free sanitary towels in all schools and public washrooms, easily accessible to economically disadvantaged women. I think this is far from being implemented, and it is only in Kenya where you will listen to things being said that children, let me say children, maybe in high school or in primary school, still lack sanitary towels. It is only in Kenya where you will listen to such. And it is the same Kenya where you will find a government making such promises and not delivering on them. The same government said that they will take administrative measures to ensure 100% enforcement of the spousal consent legal provisions in land transactions to caution women and children from dispositions of family land. Social protection. What did they say about social protection? What did this government say about social protection? The Kenya Kwanza government committed that they will eradicate malnutrition within 5 years. Eradicate malnutrition within 5 years. That is one of the commitments that they gave, to eradicate malnutrition within 5 years. And I would like to say that malnutrition is still a problem in Kenya, and many people, to the tune of millions, still go still sleep hungry in Kenya. The government also committed to increase access to early stimulation and learning, and to prioritize an integrated package of services for young children. The same government promised to improve learning outcomes by pledging to connect all schools to the internet. That is one of the things that I talked about when they talked about the digital superhighway. They promised to establish, to provide free internet access, and in this case also they promised that they will improve learning outcomes by pledging to connect all schools to the internet. I don't know whether all Kenyan schools are currently connected to the internet. I don't know, but I know some teachers will be watching this discussion and they will tell me if their schools have internet access. The government also promised to start with primary and increase investments in teacher retraining. They also promised to prioritize the passage of the Children's Bill and ensure there are child protection laws, child protection services in all sub-counties, and support the National Child Helpline. Let us move to vulnerable senior citizens. These are people over 65 years of age. And they estimated that there are about 1.8 million people aged 65 years and above. And for them, the Kenya Kwanza administration committed that they will help them achieve 100% NHIF coverage for senior citizens within 3 years. Simply, the government promised that they will provide 100% NHIF coverage for individuals aged 65 years and above within 3 years. You will tell me whether this has been achieved. They also promised that they will revamp the cash transfer programs for elderly and vulnerable households to improve operational efficiency, accountability, and coverage. In this is always done in mostly rural areas where older people are given they are guaranteed some incomes at the end of every month. And when I went to the village, it was about, I don't know, 8,000 after 3 months. I don't know whether that is still going on. They also promised to invest in education and training for caregivers and medical staff to fill the gap of skills in the provision of specialized care for older people. What did they say to people living with disabilities? They said that they will ensure 100% NHIF coverage for people living with disabilities within 18 months. That is around 1 year, 6 months. They also said that they will increase capitation of pupils with disabilities by 50% and set aside 15% of all public funded bursaries set aside for pupils with disabilities. They also promised that 5% of all market stalls to be allocated to people with disabilities. They also promised that 5% of AGPO should be for people with disabilities, with an increase in the financing fund. I don't know whether this has been achieved, but I know you will be the judge and tell me. This government made a lot of commitments, and I am worried whether these commitments have been achieved. I am worried, and I tend to question whether this government has delivered on these commitments. I am really worried. And that is why I had to ask my viewers, do you believe that this government has delivered on these commitments? Do you believe that the government has delivered on these commitments? There are still a lot of them, including governance. Now, what I would like to say on this issue is very simple. From just the overview that I have given, it is very clear that there is a very clear difference between politicians and leaders. And when we look at the case of Kenya, in Kenya we have politicians. Politicians are the kind of people who will make very, very long and sweet promises, and at the same time they work very hard not to deliver on these promises. The case of Kenya gives examples, a practical example of what happens in other African countries. We all know that it is only in Africa where leaders will make promises to impress citizens. They will make very blank promises to impress citizens and to implore citizens, to motivate citizens to elect them into political office. After being elected into political office, they know very well that they will never deliver. This is why I have always insisted, and I have always advised and stressed, emphasized to Africans and Kenyans to be specific, that be careful the kind of leaders that you elect into political office. Be very careful the kind of politicians you vote for, and be very wise-minded during elections. I have always insisted that there is a need to put leaders into political office and not politicians. We need to focus on leaders and not politicians. The mistakes that Africans and Kenyans always make is that they elect politicians into political office. A politician is somebody that you can never trust. A politician is somebody who will serve his or her interests and not completely disregard the interests of citizens. I want to say again on this platform, never elect a politician into political office. Make very wise decisions while electing these leaders. Elect a leader who is interested in improving the state of affairs, the status quo, not a leader who is interested in making more money. The case of Kenya tells you that these politicians, they always come to us to tell us what we need to hear. They tell us what we need to hear, and they always know what we need to hear. And since we Africans, we are fools, and since we Kenyans are total fools, we clap for them, and after clapping for them, we vote for them. Then after voting for them, they loot our finances, they do what benefits them, and then we remain making noise and crying. I want to urge my viewers that going forward, let us elect leaders and not politicians.